In this first part, we're going to cover some of the most damaging money mistakes men in their 50s make, including delaying serious retirement planning, underestimating healthcare costs, carrying unnecessary debt, over-supporting grown children at the cost of their own future, and staying too conservative or too risky with investments at the wrong time. If you're in your 50s right now, this is the decade where your financial decisions become permanent. There's very little room left for trial and error. What you do in the next 5 to 10 years will directly decide whether you retire with peace of mind or with constant stress. A lot of men reach this stage thinking they've already figured it out. But the reality is, this is where the biggest and most expensive mistakes start showing up. And the painful part is, most of these mistakes don't look dangerous in the moment. They feel normal, even responsible, but over time, they quietly destroy your financial future. One of the biggest mistakes is delaying serious retirement planning because you think you still have time. At 50, people often say, I've got 15 years left, I'll catch up. But what they don't realize is that the power of compounding is already slowing down, and the margin for error is almost gone. If you're not aggressively planning your retirement now, you're essentially gambling with your future lifestyle. Many men rely too much on assumptions, like expecting Social Security to cover most of their expenses or thinking their current income level will somehow continue indefinitely. But retirement planning isn't about guessing, it's about precision. You need clear numbers, clear targets, and a real strategy. Without that, you're just hoping things will work out. And hope is not a financial plan. Another major mistake is underestimating healthcare costs. This is something almost nobody takes seriously until it's too late. Healthcare in your 50s and beyond can quietly become one of your biggest expenses, especially in the US where costs are unpredictable and often extremely high. Many men assume Medicare will handle everything, but the truth is, it doesn't cover everything. There are premiums, out of pocket expenses, long term care costs, and unexpected medical situations that can drain your savings faster than anything else. If you don't plan for healthcare specifically, it can completely wipe out decades of hard work. Smart planning means setting aside a dedicated healthcare fund, understanding insurance options, and preparing for worst case scenarios, not just best case outcomes. Then there's the issue of carrying unnecessary debt into your 50s. This is where things get dangerous. Debt in your 20s or 30s is one thing. You still have time and earning power to fix it. But debt in your 50s becomes a serious burden, whether it's credit cards, personal loans, or even a mortgage that's not under control. It limits your ability to save, invest, and prepare for retirement. What's worse is that many men normalize this debt. They get used to monthly payments and stop seeing it as a problem. But every dollar going toward interest is a dollar not going towards your future. At this stage of life, the priority should be simplifying your finances, reducing liabilities, and freeing up as much cash flow as possible. Carrying debt into retirement is one of the fastest ways to turn what should be a peaceful phase of life into a stressful one. Another silent mistake is over-supporting grown children at the cost of your own financial security. This comes from a good place, wanting to help your kids succeed, but it often goes too far. Many men in their 50s are still financially supporting adult children, paying rent, covering bills, or even funding lifestyles that the children should be responsible for themselves. What they don't realize is that every dollar spent this way is coming directly out of their retirement. There's a harsh truth here. You can borrow money for college, but you can't borrow money for retirement. If you sacrifice your financial future for your children, you're not actually helping them. You're just shifting the burden to a later stage of life when you're least capable of handling it. Setting boundaries is not selfish. At the same time, it's necessary. Many men make the mistake of becoming either too conservative or too aggressive with their investments, and both extremes can be equally harmful. Some people panic as they get older and move everything into cash or low return investments, thinking they're protecting their money. But what they're actually doing is killing their growth potential. Inflation continues to rise, and if your investments aren't growing, your purchasing power is shrinking every year. On the other hand, Some men take the opposite approach and become overly aggressive, trying to make up for lost time by chasing high-risk investments. This often leads to big losses that they simply don't have time to recover from. The key here is balance. You need a strategy that protects your downside while still allowing for steady growth. It's not about playing it safe or taking big risks. It's about being smart and intentional. Another overlooked mistake is ignoring lifestyle inflation. Many men in their 50s are at their peak earning years, which means more money is coming in. But instead of using that to strengthen their financial position, they increase their lifestyle. Bigger house, nicer car, more expensive habits. It feels justified because they've worked hard for it. But what's happening in the background is that their expenses are rising at the exact time when they should be locking things down. This creates a dangerous situation where even a small disruption, like job loss or health issues, can create a financial crisis. The goal in your 50s should not be to upgrade your lifestyle. It should be to secure your future. Every extra dollar should have a purpose, either reducing risk or building long-term stability. There's also a mindset problem that shows up around this age, and that's overconfidence. After decades of earning and managing money, many men believe they've seen it all. They trust their instincts more than actual data or planning. This leads to decisions based on emotion rather than logic. Whether it's holding on to underperforming investments because of attachment, refusing to adapt to new financial strategies, or ignoring professional advice, overconfidence can be incredibly expensive. The financial world changes constantly, and what worked 20 years ago might not work today. Staying flexible and open to learning is not optional, it's critical. And finally, one of the biggest mistakes is simply not having a clear exit strategy. A lot of men focus on earning money, but never define what retirement actually looks like for them. When do you want to retire? How much do you need monthly? What kind of lifestyle are you aiming for? Without clear answers, you're just moving forward without direction. This leads to last-minute panic, rushed decisions, and often settling for less than what you could have achieved with proper planning. Retirement is not just about money, it's about clarity. And clarity only
In
comes
this
from
second
taking the
part,
time
we're
to
going to
plan
cover
in
the mistakes
detail.
that quietly destroy wealth even when everything looks stable on the surface, including poor tax planning, ignoring estate planning, relying too heavily on a single income source, and making emotional financial decisions that feel right in the moment but create long-term damage. One of the most expensive mistakes men in their 50s make is poor tax planning. At this stage, it's not just about how much you earn, it's about how much you keep. Many people focus on growing their income and investments, but completely ignore the tax impact of their decisions. Withdrawals from retirement accounts, capital gains, Social Security taxation, all of these can significantly reduce your actual income if not planned correctly. The problem is, taxes in retirement are often more complex than during your working years. Without a strategy, you could end up paying far more than necessary. Smart investors don't just think about returns, they think about after-tax returns. That means understanding which accounts to draw from first, how to spread out withdrawals, and how to minimize your tax burden over time. If you ignore this, you're essentially giving away a portion of your wealth that you could have legally kept. Another critical mistake is ignoring estate planning. A lot of men assume estate planning is only for the wealthy, but that's completely wrong. If you have assets, a home, savings, investments, you need a plan for what happens to that money. Without proper estate planning, your assets can get tied up in legal processes, heavily taxed, or distributed in ways you never intended. This creates unnecessary stress for your family at a time when they're already dealing with emotional challenges. Estate planning isn't just about writing a will, it's about structuring your assets in a way that protects your family and ensures your wishes are followed. This includes things like setting up beneficiaries, considering trusts if necessary, and making sure everything is up to date. The biggest regret people have is not doing this early enough, because once it's too late, there's nothing you can fix. Then there's the danger of relying too heavily on a single income source.
Many men in their 50s have built their lives around one primary source of income, usually their job or business. It feels stable because it's been working for years. But the reality is, this is one of the riskiest positions you can be in. Job markets change, industries shift, and health issues can appear without warning. If your entire financial life depends on one stream of income, you're extremely vulnerable. At this stage, the focus should be on diversification, not just in investments, but in income streams. This could mean building passive income, investing in dividend-paying assets, or creating additional revenue sources that don't rely on your daily effort. The goal is simple. You should not be in a position where one disruption can collapse your entire financial structure. Another mistake that doesn't get talked about enough is the lack of a long-term care plan. People plan for retirement, but they don't plan for what happens if they need assistance later in life. Long-term care, whether it's in-home care or a facility, can be incredibly expensive, and it's not always covered by standard health insurance. Many families end up draining their savings or selling assets just to cover these costs. This is something that needs to be considered early, while you still have options. Whether it's long-term care insurance or setting aside dedicated funds, ignoring this risk is one of the biggest financial blind spots. It's not a pleasant topic, but avoiding it doesn't make it go away. Emotional decision making is another major factor that destroys wealth in your 50s. At this stage, the stakes are higher, and every decision carries more weight. Fear and greed become more dangerous because there's less time to recover from mistakes. Market downturns can trigger panic selling, while bull markets can lead to overconfidence and risky bets. The problem is, emotions feel justified in the moment. Selling during a crash feels like protecting yourself, and chasing high returns feels like making smart progress. But in reality, these decisions often lock in losses and expose you to unnecessary risk. The most successful investors at this stage are not the ones who make the most moves, but the ones who stay consistent and disciplined. There's also a common mistake of not adjusting financial strategies as life changes. What worked in your 30s and 40s won't necessarily work in your 50s. Your priorities shift, your risk tolerance changes, and your timeline becomes shorter. But many men continue using outdated strategies simply because they're familiar. This leads to mismatched decisions, like taking on too much risk or being too conservative at the wrong time. Financial planning is not a one-time activity, it's something that needs to evolve with your life. Regularly reviewing and adjusting your strategy is essential if you want to stay on track. Another hidden issue is neglecting inflation in long-term planning. A lot of people calculate their retirement needs based on today's expenses without accounting for how much things will cost in the future. But inflation quietly erodes your purchasing power every single year. What feels like a comfortable amount today might not be enough 10 or 15 years from now. If your investments are not keeping up with inflation, you're effectively losing money, even if your account balance looks stable. This is why growth still matters, even in your 50s. You need your money to work for you, not just sit there. Finally, one of the biggest regrets men have is not taking action when it mattered most. They knew what they needed to do, they had access to information, but they delayed. They waited for the right time, for more clarity, for better conditions. But time is the one thing you don't have the luxury of wasting in your 50s. Every year counts. Every decision compounds. The difference between taking action now and waiting even a few years can be massive when it comes to your financial future. The hard truth is, no one is coming to fix this for you. The responsibility is yours. At this stage of life, the goal is not to chase perfection, it's to avoid irreversible mistakes. You don't need to be a financial genius, but you do need to be intentional, disciplined, and realistic, because the decisions you make now are not just about money, they're about the quality of your life in the years ahead.